Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. This is my first time in Romania, having a lot of fun. It's super amazing. Um, so I'm here today to share with you a problem that I personally keep running into, and a lot of people around me keep running into. They talk about me a lot. With they talk about on this with me a lot. Um, so just to kick off with a few questions first. How many people here are front-end developers? Show of hands. All right, most of you, of course, JavaScript, right? How many of you have had the problem of your app loading too slowly for the first time? Right? Almost everyone, because we are all looking for smaller apps. Now, when you're using something like Angular or React or Vue.js, your bundle size tends to uh, blow up exponentially suddenly, and before you know it, you have like a 3 MB or a 5 MB vendor bundle, and it's taking 30 seconds to load your app. And effectively, this talk is going to be around what can you do to effectively reduce that bundle size, and what are other different strategies that we can use to make a better experience for our users. So, as introduced, my name is Mashhood, and I'm the technical lead at Recurship. Recurship is a JavaScript consultancy. So we're working with a lot of different projects, mostly on Angular and Node.js, which is why I get to see a lot of different Angular apps that have this particular problem, and we're trying to help our clients fix it. I'm fairly active in Karachi. The communities over there. We have Angular Pakistan, which is obviously the core Angular community over there, Docker, and the local GDG chapters. And of course, I'm also the Google developer expert for web and Angular. So on average, I'd like to know from you guys, how long does it take for you guys to load your app for the first time on a browser? Any suggestions? 30 seconds? Well, it's so the average is actually not that good. It's about 16 seconds for first view, right? And it takes about 20 seconds to fully load it up. Um, on average, we're shipping about 420 KBs of JavaScript. I feel if you're using like a framework, that's usually a bit higher. But effectively, these numbers are not looking good, especially when you read something like, if the user doesn't see anything for 3 seconds, they kind of leave the page. So nobody's obviously waiting for 16 seconds for your app to load. So we understand that we want to make this experience better, but we also want to understand where is the exact bottleneck. So obviously, when you initially think about it, you might think that, hey, my button size is big, so it takes a lot of time to download, which is why it's slow. But that's not necessarily the case. So this is a chart here that shows that between desktop and mobile, there's a 5-time difference in just compiling JavaScript. So we're not just fetching it, we're not executing it, we're not doing anything, we're just compiling the JavaScript that has been received and preparing it for execution. So this is for a 1 MB file. And if you look at a slightly different perspective, if you're running on a laptop, the one at the bottom is MacBook Pro, and the one on top is a first gen Moto G. There's a 5-time difference, and it's 2.5 seconds just for compiling your JavaScript. So that's insane. 2.5 seconds, the user just waiting, looking at a blank screen potentially, waiting for your JavaScript to compile. So this is a problem, and faster internet connections, 5G, is not going to fix this. Obviously, over time, our mobile processors will probably get better and faster. The technologies itself will get better. But right now, this is a major problem, and this is what we need to fix. So effectively, with a basic understanding of the problem, we understand that we can use things like gzip to make our button size smaller, but how do we actually make it smaller? And that's what we're going to focus on in the next slides. So some of these points are going to relate specifically to Angular, but you'll notice that most of them are actually a bit more generic, so they can be applied to any framework. And I feel this is one of them. So as frameworks improve, they're constantly working towards making them more performant and more optimized. And Angular especially has promised this one, and they have superbly delivered this on every major release. And the latest release that we have is upcoming. We were hoping to have it out already, but it's just a bit delayed. Hopefully, it's going to be out in a week or so. And so Angular has your core library that you use, and it also has this build tool called Angular CLI that helps you scaffold and manage your build pipeline. And if you update both of your tools to the max, so your Angular CLI will help you update your app itself, then you get a few new features that will help you reduce your bundle size automatically. So now this is specifically just for the new version coming up. Every 6 months, they release a new version, and every time there's some pretty awesome stuff that comes in. This time, thanks to Webpack 4, there have been some really awesome optimizations in there, where I've seen anywhere between 10 to 20% decrease in bundle size in the projects that I've been working on. RxJS 6, again, doesn't look like it's a bundle size thing, but actually they refactored their importing strategy, and that has helped out not including operators that you're not using. Tree shakeable services, you don't strip out stuff you don't need. Support for Bazel, so that you can do more advanced compilation things, and better integration with Service Worker, something we'll talk about in a bit. So how many Angular developers do we have in the room here? Okay. And how many of you guys are using AOT? Wow, fewer. Interesting. So I think AOT came out with Angular 2, and I feel that this is like everybody should be using AOT now, because it's like obvious to use it. Effectively, what this is doing is it's stripping out. So when Angular when you want to run Angular, you compile your Angular code in templates, and then it runs in the browser. AOT compiles them in the build process and just ships the optimized version to you on the browser. So that obviously means it's a faster boot time and it's a smaller bundle. So this has been there for a while. In Angular 5, they introduced something called Build Optimizer. And this was another library written. It's a plugin for Webpack that does optimizations specifically for Angular and is used by Angular CLI. Now, this is, if you're using Angular 5, which is the latest version, you are already using this, because this gets enabled automatically using AOT. So as you'll notice a pattern here, Angular is doing a lot of stuff, and they're doing it in a way that you don't have to do anything. You just need to make sure that you're using their tools and you're using them properly, and you're going to get the best, most optimized app that is available. For those of us who have more enterprisey software, we need a lot of custom stuff. Maybe we can figure out to create a plugin that will super optimize our apps. We can eject from Angular CLI, and we can change the config in any way we want. That's available. Personally, I have not been able to. I've not needed to do that yet because essentially Angular has been doing a good job so far. And finally, this is something super exciting that's it's going to be actually available in Angular 7, but it's already available under a flag in Angular 6, and they're essentially changing the way they render the templates. And that effectively means that right now, if you build a Hello World app, it takes about 35 KB compressed. It's the bundle size. And that comes down to a 3.7 KB compressed when you use this Ivy renderer. Somebody did a to-do app, and that was 12.7 KB. It's not ready for prime time, but this is, like, again, promising technology that's going to help us in the coming months to reduce our bundle size even further. So once you've done your build stuff, you start looking at your code. And one of the more obvious options that you have in your code is that you start using lazy loading. For those who are not aware, lazy loading is effectively only downloading the resources that you want for that particular view. So if I'm downloading the login page, I should just have the authentication module downloaded, not the dashboard module, because I don't need that. And again, Angular here, one of the things I love about it is how everything is just built into it. All you have to do is create your modules, which you do when you're making Angular apps, and then just reference them properly using this load children property in the router. And this handles everything for you, like literally everything. There'll be some edge cases that you might have to check. I haven't come across many of those, but effectively it's gonna build the chunks for you. It's gonna configure Angular in a way so it knows what to fetch, when to fetch. And I worked with an enterprise app where we had several big modules, and we went from a 5 MB render file to just 200 KB for the login page. So that was a big win. So once you're done just going through your code, then you want to start analyzing your bundles to see how else can you improve, what else can you take out of the bundles to make them smaller. And it's not obvious right away, but there might be things that you added before but you're not using anymore, or it could be some incorrect imports that you did that got included, which resulted in bloating of your bundle. So there are many tools. I mentioned two over here, which I usually use in my applications. So one is part of Angular CLI, stats JSON true. You just use this flag when you're doing your build, and it will dump a JSON file. And that JSON file can be uploaded into webpack.github.io/analyze, and it's going to give you this beautiful dashboard that can show you all your dependencies and how they're working together, all the modules. And you can just play around with it, check the sizes, see if everything makes sense, and maybe strip out something that you don't want. There's another tool called Source Map Explorer. There's also one for Webpack. Webpack Bundle Analyzer does this, relatively the same thing. And this takes your bundle and essentially visualizes all that is in there. And in this particular example, the thing that I came across, there were two main things that when I saw this bundle, I was like, I'd messed up somewhere. So on the right side, you can see there's this huge rectangle that belongs to RxJS. So I talked about RxJS before, and what's happening here is all those little boxes inside it in the extreme right, they're all different operators that are being included. And I know in this application, I just used 2 operators. So this means I messed up the import somewhere, and that has included all the operators of RxJS into this bundle. And that's 300 KB that I can now save by simply making sure that my imports are correct. Similarly, at the bottom here on the left, you'll see Moment.js, and Moment.js is also including quite a few things, and it's worth another 300 KB. These are moment locale things that, again, I'm not using in my app, and I just stripped them out. And within like 15, 20 minutes, I was able to save 600 KB on this particular bundle by just having a quick look. So tools like this are useful, and effectively they help you get a high-level view of what's happening in your application. Once you've done optimizing your bundle and you can't really figure out how to make it smaller anymore, but it's still too big, we then start thinking about what else can we do to improve the overall user experience. And one of my personal favorites is using service workers. Now, service workers have got a fairly wide adoption, and Angular especially has native support in them. All you have to do is pass in a flag in Angular CLI, and it adds all the configuration for service worker in your Angular app. And then it manages everything. It creates the JSON config files, everything for you using that. So that's super useful. And so what's going to happen is your first load time might be slower, but from that point on, it's going to use the cache to load your app instantly. And even better is whenever you update your app, the updates happen in the background. And whenever a new version is ready, you can just say, hey, you know what? I have a new version. Just boom, let's update this app, and you can use the new version. So it's a really good and seamless experience for the user. And then there's a slightly different approach that usually is not used for performance, but it does help performance a lot, is server-side rendering. And this is, again, applies to all frameworks. So when your application becomes really big, at that point you might consider focusing on doing server-side rendering, so that instead of just shipping your full bundle, you render it on the server side and then send it over, so that the user gets to see something first while the rest of the application loads in the back end. So this is definitely another strategy that you can use. Finally, I want to touch on, so this is an amazing article I've linked below by Adi Usmani, and it's really about why do we get in that position where our bundles get too big. And effectively, if you understand the problem and you define your budgets from before, you won't get into this thing in the first place. So Webpack now supports this thing called performance budgets. And effectively, all you need to do is configure some stuff in your package.json. And if you're using Webpack, it will start giving you warnings and even errors if you start exceeding your budget. And the cool part about this is that you can do this part of your build toolchain. And if you exceed certain limits, it can throw an error and can stop the build right there. So if you include a new library that broke the budget, then you really need to think about it. It's, hey, should I be using a different library, or is it worthwhile sacrificing that experience for the user in order to include this library? So it gets some interesting conversation started over there. And that was about it from my side. Yeah, looking forward to meeting you all in the breaks. I'll be here for the next few days. Yeah, thank you very much.